Hello?
Yes, Aluani? Okay, I think we seem to be battling. We'll try and get Aluani on a better line. Let's go to Butana in Rosebank. Butana, we want to talk about labor unions, yeah?
Yes. But let me start here. Investing in strengthening the hand of Cyril Ramaphosa is paying off dividend. Before COVID, 1,000 work were lost in the private sector by the bank that is now named helping the Guptas to cash R1 million in Dubai. Let's come to the union. Where is the labor minister? Do we still have a labor minister? By the way, what did he do about the UIF? What did he do about Nkandla? What did he do about the truck workers? Just requesting that, look, apply the law. What did he do? Nothing, nada. So you don't have government. People are mismanaging our country. It is not a joke.
We hear you, Butana, there from Rosebank. And for me, one thing that really, I know that KG spoke about lack of development of infrastructure like HMPG Stadium, and we keep on talking about township economy. And you know how much cash it's left in those communities when we have these sporting events. I mean, and also it promotes what we call sports tourism. Because if the game is played in Mamelodi, because I've got relatives, I've got friends, so it's just more than a game. It's just more than attending a game, And the township have got this special, special vibe about it. So, because people want to be around towns, just like any development. Look at all these big buildings that they are building for the municipalities. Look at the Joburg Metro. Look at the Tshwane Metro, in terms of the buildings. Top class. So they say they don't belong to the township. Those posh municipal offices that cost billions, why don't they build them in townships so that this township economy can be realized? These are some of the issues. Odi Stadium. We attended a consultation process. They call them what? Consultation processes. Back in 2015. And we resolved, because they've even lobbied people they give 3 options. They lobbied people to choose one. For us, we are not interested whether option 1, 2, 3, but it was just to get that stadium going so that the children in that area can participate and play. We keep on complaining about people, the young people being addicted to drugs, nyaupe and stuff like that, alcohol. But we don't create facilities for them to play. Facilities are just wasting away, and people are involved in politicking. Thabiso Midrand.
Yes, Murio, how are you?
Good, how's it, man?
All right. Yeah, my issue is one, because, where is the ruling party if the DA is doing all those things? Because the governing party is the ANC. They are only controlling the Western Cape. They always have to wait for EFF to take actions against this racism. I don't know where is the youth league of the ANC, even if they still have the youth league or whoever, if they still exist or anything. They only exist when it's election time. I'll listen on the radio.
Thank you very much, Thabiso. And hearing from John Committees as well about this particular issue, where are the South African Football Association? Because they were championing this whole processes of saying we are building football legacy stadiums. Why are they not a party to the fight that John Committees is? Where is the PSL? Football stakeholders, why are they silent? Including chairmen or chairwomen of clubs. So there is no noise about this issue. It's just going to happen and life goes on. So for me, I'm saying the DA, they know how to exercise power, because there's a difference between being, being in power and exercising that particular power. And of course, within the confines of the law and within the confines of the constitutions. I find it to be very, very bizarre transaction that has really happened, and not even a voice? Political parties within the city of Cape Town, was there any pushback? Because that thing cannot just be done by the DA. As much as they are a governing party, there are processes within the municipality or within the metro, because Cape Town is a metro. There are processes. There cannot be just side deals being done there. Why this silence from other political parties within the city of Cape Town, including, of course, the main opposition being the ANC? Good party of Patricia de Lille, they've got seats in Cape Town, and other parties within the city of Cape Town. Total silence. And it is quite unfortunate. So these are some of the things that are very, very concerning. If you want to share your views on this last section of the program, feel free on 0861987000. Yeah, so these are issues that I just feel that they must be dealt with excessively. All right, there's one tweet that came from, I'm not sure, I'll try to get the name. He says, "You are unreasonable on this one, Murio. Greenpoint needs investment that will enable management of that stadium. Otherwise, service delivery budget will have to go to that facility, which. We know Cape Town City do not have more supporters, only rugby has. What do you want?" I asked the question whether it's a commercial thing or not, but I still feel, because sometimes principle is very much important. When these rugby people were approached about Newlands City, about Newlands Stadium, they flatly refused. And they decided that they don't want to be part of it. So post the FIFA World Cup, these are the people who should benefit. Well, this is my position about it. We can differ, we can argue. Just like joint committees were saying, Currie Cup won't fill that particular stadium. And we're even out of Super Rugby, by the way. Yeah? We're even out of, they call it what? Super Rugby or whatever. Because they've changed the format. So, let's go to Ambassador in Midrand. Ambassador, you said it's a business move.
Yes, Rio. I think the issue here, it might sound like it's a racist move by the DA in the Western Cape, but we are in charge of all the other 9 provinces where there are government properties that our people need to use, but we are not taking advantage of that. If we had even go to the province or to the municipalities, you have identified a land that you want to use for commercial purposes or for productive purposes, you will be told of processes that you will not even be able to comply with. And then you will begin to understand that it's like when it's us, there are processes.
Yeah.
And when it's others, then these people get this access to land, access to properties overnight. And then you begin to ask yourself, what is the challenge? It does look like our people and corruption, they are friends.
We got to leave it at that, Ambassador.
Win.
KG Midrand.
Same thing happened at Losses, actually. I said it when we were preparing for the World Cup. Why are we investing in other people's yards? Because HMPG right now is still standing. We should have just left Loftus as it was and gone to Mamelodi or even Mabopane at Odi Stadium and actually invest in something that, because when you do redress, you have to look at benefiting people that didn't benefit before. John is on the money. The real deal is that, I don't know why when they thought of actually getting rid of Newlands, why they didn't actually approach him and say, well, because we've got the power in government, we want to give you what we no longer want and you can develop this one for yourself.
Now we are talking. Peter Mashavani on technical, Njabule Subeko, as well as Sina Zotele. Thank you for holding my hand this afternoon. Kisanyana Wabudi Koshi, your ultimate Knoxman, Ananda Khomi standing by with the news. It's exactly 6 o'clock.
Power News.
In your top stories this hour, SALGA panel discussion zooms in on corruption within municipalities and NUMSA to picket at Denel tomorrow over months-long non-payment of salaries. Good evening, Amananda Khombo. Panelists at the South African Local Government Association's National Members Assembly have deliberated on the strides made to transform the local government sector over the past 20 years. Corruption has been labelled as one of the factors leading to the lack of service delivery within municipalities. Panelists have, for the most part of today, been reflecting on the challenges that still persist in communities and the gaps that need to be filled in efforts to deliver on basic services. Former chairperson of the Municipal Demarcation Board, Michael Sutcliffe, says that there's a need for stability in local government. He says corruption is sometimes caused by factions within political parties.
And there are two factions in the ANC. There's a faction of comrades and there's a faction of crooks. The media usually portray it as if it's factions of individuals. But I think in any political party, some of those individuals become crooks. And they don't mobilize necessarily people in the party. They're in alignment with crooks on the outside of the party that will then use those institutions of power for their own purpose.
The Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Lechesa Tsenoli, says that councillors who've lost their lives for refusing to give in to corrupt demands must be celebrated.
We must celebrate their lives, remind others that it is correct to stand your ground. This is part of the role we are playing. We would have long gone to retire to do some interesting farming. But part of the reason it is necessary for all of us to remain is to provide support for the ethical, those who do their work with integrity, those who fight corruption within systems.
A continuation of that panel discussion will be brought to you live right here on Power 98.7 from this hour to 8 p.m. In other news, workers' unions at South African Airways have lambasted the airline's failure to pay workers their salaries for close to 8 months now. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa and the Cabin Crew Association picketed outside the Airways Park in Kempton Park today. SACA President Zazis Banyoni says that monies were allocated to the airline last month to fund the business rescue plan and the restructuring of the airline by Treasury, but workers have still not been paid. Sibanyoni Mugambi says the situation is worsened by management's attempts to unilaterally change the conditions of employment under the threat of dismissal. She says this has been the most difficult 8 months for the employees.
I mean, it's been a painful, 8 months for workers that have not received salaries. I mean, it's extremely desperate. And the reason why the picket happened today is because, we know that there was a 1.5 has not been paid over to workers, and we want to know why. Actually, this money should have been paid by now, and we're not getting clear answers as to why this money is not being paid to workers, and what are these conditions that are being spoken about.
Meanwhile, NUMSA members are set to descend on the Centurion headquarters of salaries. The union says there are 13th checks.
This is why we say that government.
And lastly, speculation continues on what tough measures will be imposed on COVID-19 hotspots ahead of the festive season as the clock inches closer to President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to the nation. Ramaphosa's 8 o'clock address follows a special sitting of cabinet.
say power. Power 98.7. Now we're talking. The Power Update with Ntokozo Mazibuko.
Live to Kalini in the northwest, where residents have been protesting, demanding justice for Mahlomola Mosweu. Last week, the Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the twin murder convictions. How are the family of Mahlomola Mosweu handling the decision that was made by the SCA?
The family is heartbroken. They are saying the only reason why Peter Dorevat and Philip Skete, they are out is because they are white and they are money. If they were like you and I, Bafana Nzimande and Ntokozo Mazibuko, Siba Mnyama Sinje, Gabe Upala Ezimnyama Israel.
Power News reporter Bafana Nzimande.
The Power Update, weekdays 12 to 1 p.m. on Power 98.7.
Did you know that plastic pollution threatens human life and the ecosystem? Plastic is found in almost everything, from plastic bags, bottles, straws, and much more. However, it is not environmentally friendly. It takes centuries to degrade and ends up dumped carelessly on the ground before ending up in the ocean, where it threatens sea life. This is an urgent call to all of us to get into the habit of saying no to single-use plastic bags at the till and keeping your own bags in your handbag or car. Cut down on single-use plastic products like plastic straws. And when you need water, opt for reusable water bottles. A message brought to you by the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries.
Celebrating the 20 years of democratic local government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7.
We've got no water. We've got nothing. If I'm going to work, I love to wash and clean.
We've been having no water since I was born here. So now we're fighting for our rights. We want water.
They have spent 3% of the MIG. A lot of the money is going to go back and the community is suffering. They are not spending their own budget. And so there's no service delivery.
We are at the view that support was not implemented properly to us. So we are still waiting for the support to be implemented properly. We are still aiming that the MEC must come up perhaps maybe with other mechanism of the support to be implemented properly.
Celebrating the 20 years of democratic local government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7. We're in this together. Doing our part to keep you informed, healthy, and safe. Power 98.7, your COVID-19 information station.
A very good evening to you and welcome to this special broadcast of Power Business, where we are actually at the site of a big celebration event that is taking place, celebrating 20 years of the South African Local Government Association and the role that they have played in promoting local government in South Africa. This broadcast coming to you here, of course, on Power 98.7. You're also warm welcome to those of you listening to us on Capricorn, who, of course, we send a special message out to this week, celebrating 13 years of radio. Happy birthday indeed to Capricorn. So it's good to have you all with us this evening for the next 2 hours, as we are going to talk about probably the most important level of government, and it is the one that we interact with on a daily basis. It is the level of government or the sphere of government that actually most impacts our lives, although you would think it otherwise if you look at how we generally as citizens tend to respond to more to things that happen at national level, which is why even when political parties pitch their campaigns when it comes to elections, or even at local government level, it's pitched on with a strong national message. But tonight is all about reflecting on the 20 years of SALGA. It's also about reflecting on 25 years of democratic local government. It's 25 years ago, just over 25 years ago, of course, the 1st of November 1999 was that we had our first local government, 1995, I should say, that we had our first local government elections. So it's a perfect opportunity then, as we celebrate this, to also reflect and have a look at the way forward. So let me introduce my panel. It's a greatly assembled panel, I must say. And if I do flout a protocol in the process, you will bear with me. I'm not going to say, oh, protocol observed, and then ignore protocol. So if I do tend to destroy it, you will forgive me. But I think it's appropriate maybe that I introduce our host for this event, and that is hosting this event that'll be taking place until tomorrow. That's the president of the South African Local Government Association, Ms. Thembi Nkadimeng, who is to my right. Welcome to you. It's so good to have you with us, and congratulations on 20 years of SALGA.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Deputy Minister, Deputy Speaker, our Head of Infrastructure and Government, Deputy Presidents of SALGA, MECs who are here. Thank you very much for having us, and thank you for celebrating and reflecting with us the 20 years of success.
Thank you for having us. And now that you've already started with the Deputy Minister, perhaps let's also welcome him. Deputy Minister, is that okay to still call you that? Because we know we've been... Have you been told, by the way, that you've been redeployed?
Well, thank you very much, Titi, and good evening to yourself, to everybody here present, and to the listeners. Yes, I've been told. It's been a very interesting period.
To say the least.
At least since yesterday, people have been struggling to determine how they address me, but that's okay. At least I know that at this point I'm Deputy Minister of Co-operative, until such time that a decision is implemented.
Absolutely. So I think what we can say with certainty as well is that you are the former president of SALGA as well, so it's most appropriate that we have you with us here. Now, and let's also, to my left here, also welcome the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lechesa Tsenoli. Good evening, sir. It's good to have you with us representing the National Legislature.
Good evening, Titi, and good evening to your listeners and our special guests. And I want to say thank you to the President of SALGA and her team for remembering agitators from long ago.
Yeah. And as was said to you, as you were warned in before we went on the air, that tonight I'm the one who's in charge. So there'll be no Delela here. With that, let me also welcome the fourth member of our panel this evening, who, of course, these days is the head of investment and infrastructure in the office in the Presidency, and Dr. Sputla Ramakgopa, who also happens to be the last ANC mayor of Tshwane.
Oh,
let the record indicate.
Historically.
It's good to have you with us. And as I said, it's a well-assembled panel of people who also have very, very strong roots and strong experience with local government.
No, thank you, Titi, and good evening to the listeners. Just to congratulate President Nkadimeng and the leadership of SALGA for occasioning such a conversation. I guess that the future can benefit immensely from reflections of the past. So congratulations to them.
Absolutely. And let's start there with the President, Ms. Thembi Nkadimeng, Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng. 20 years, we are calling it a celebration. And clearly, if we talk about a celebration, there must be something to celebrate. As SALGA, when you reflect on the past 20 years, what are those milestones that you wish to highlight and celebrate?
Well, there's quite a number, Titi. Firstly, the establishment of municipalities. One could take for granted running down over 1,000 municipalities then to around 283 or so at the time, putting up systems in place, incorporation of all those small cities to form municipalities, and setting up institutes which make sure that local government is institutionalized and it's run across the country, running a wall-to-wall systems of our wards, and at the same time interpreting the law to put the systems and the structures in place. Is one thing people will say that is governance. Possibly it doesn't reflect on what delivery is about, but that's a system which assists. If it's put up properly, it then assists for everything else to run. But then you come to what we offer, and we are basically what we're supposed to do, which comes from the objects of local government, basket of service delivery services. I mean, you could imagine if municipalities don't pick up your waste at the door, as the city of Johannesburg, for 2 weeks in succession, you possibly wouldn't like the space where you would be. But we've been able to even introduce rural waste currently, water, sanitation, housing, beginning strongly on building on our socio-economic impetus in municipalities to ensure that we now move beyond the offering of basic services to the future, but to bridge the gap of inequality, which is what we overlook, that for the 4 million people to have houses, it just doesn't come with the house. It comes with a portioning of land. And it could only have been the era that we are in and the 20 years that we are celebrating. 97% of our people in this country have been connected to electricity. Before, I mean, I know when I arrived, we were given stays. I was a student at the University of the North then. From town to the university itself, for over 30 kilometers, you'll only see a light at the University of the North. The whole area was dark, but go there today. It's a different ball game. Everybody has, including even a street light. Something which could be underestimated, but the bridging of that inequality, ensuring that everybody shares from the same pot and equitably, is what we've been able to develop. And over time, I think we'll be building into that foundation to ensure that we become a better country.
Okay, let me bring you in, Deputy Minister Pakstau, as also you have the benefit of having had a view from both sides, as in terms of the work of SALGA, who have their stated objective as promoting and protecting organized local government. How successful have they been on delivering on that mandate? I mean, as I said, having looked at their work from the outside as mayor of the city of Johannesburg, and also having been president of SALGA.
Well, thank you very much once again, TT. SALGA has played an important role in many respects in the country. And maybe I should start with today, because in fact today the National Assembly passed the Municipal Systems Amendment Bill, and by passing the Municipal Systems Amendment Bill took into account many critical contributions by SALGA, acknowledged even in the National Assembly today in terms of what they sought to introduce to enable improvement in governance in local government. But SALGA plays a number of other roles. It is, for example, the labor body on behalf of local government, so it participates in the South African Local Government Bargaining Council on behalf of the employer body, which are the municipalities. And over the past few years, we have observed that there hasn't been any major dispute in the local government sector with regard to labor. That implies that you have a labor body that engages with labor, or an employer body that engages with labor in a manner that resolves problem up front. And I think that is very commendable to keep stability in the local government system. It also plays a critical role in supporting local government. At the point at which municipality or local government is elected, SALGA assumes responsibility for the training of all councillors to assume their responsibility. It also has developed programs around training municipal officials together with COCTA and other agencies. So it becomes a body that supports local government to undertake its responsibility. And lastly, as the voice of local government, it has been crucial in a number of bodies, particularly the President's Coordinating Council, the President's Infrastructure Coordinating Council, and a whole range of other bodies where SALGA represents local government and influences national government decisions.
Of course, SALGA is an association which is a voluntary association, but the vast majority of municipalities in this country, if not all, belong to SALGA. So I want to, as I come to you, Dr. Ramakgopa, and get your reflections as well on the kind of support that you would have received at the city level, at municipal level, from a SALGA, and how that has helped you in delivering in your portfolio, in your role as the executive mayor, as you were at the time as the city of Tshwane?
Well, the contribution has been immense. I think DM has begun to map some of the role that SALGA has played over a period of time. And I must say that it has been successful in exercising its agency, essentially articulating on the part of local authorities. But before even the advent of SALGA, I mean, just to answer what has been some of the momentous achievements of a democratic local government, I mean, for me, the biggest one coming from having been in the leadership of the city of Tshwane is around ensuring that we were moving away from black local authorities, whites-only councils, but essentially we are creating a non-racial, democratic, and accountable local government. Because I think if you look at the dispensation that preceded that, you would have found that the black local councils didn't have a revenue base. And even in instances where they had a revenue base, it was the whites-only councils that were benefiting from that. So it's significant because one of the primary responsibilities of a state is to ensure that there's an equitable distribution of resources. So essentially, it's the rich that are subsidizing the poor. And in this way, you are able to roll out the much-needed social infrastructure in your much more poorer areas of the municipality. So we moved from 12, if you like, disparate councils in Tshwane, and by 2000, we had the city of Tshwane established. So for me, that's a significant achievement. And then there's issues around the role that SALGA has played in ensuring that poor local authorities are able to benefit from the national purse. I mean, the dispensation of the equitable share, although enacted in 1999, there's been significant reconfiguration of the formula that determines those allocations. They are significant because they are going to ensure that the asymmetries in relation to development that define the urban-rural divide are not as pronounced. That even if you are in the rural areas, you don't have a significant revenue base. Through that dispensation, you get some allocation from the national purse, and you are able to improve the lot of the people going forward. So I think it's significant. And then the other significant one is the struggles that SALGA had to put up to ensure that we realize our original mandate in the Constitution, the responsibility for planning at the local authority level. I mean, before the advent of Sputla, you find that you had the Development Facilitation Act. The responsibilities were carried out by different spheres of government, when essentially people who comprehend and understand the configuration of the space, the tension, and how best you can efficiently use the space and ensure that the spatial justice is local authority. So the advent of Sputla and its introduction represent a significant reaffirmation of the role of local government as an independent sphere of government, so that we are able to contribute to the totality of the efforts to improve, if you like, development in the country, the assertion around how we see the future, how we want to see development taking shape in our space. I think it's a major achievement by SALGA, having advocated for that, being in the trenches, but articulating a more rational, coherent argument on why those responsibilities must sit there. I think for me it's a major achievement.
Absolutely. Let's bring in now the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. The South African Local Government Association accounts to Parliament. So they have to come in on an annual basis and also talk about the work that they're doing and the expenditure, on all of that, and talk about what they've been up to account to members of Parliament. I do wonder, though, and you can reflect on this, whether this is a role that it does not enjoy the prominence of other, the other sectors of government in terms of the role that they have to play in accounting to Parliament. Is it something that at the national level is taken seriously enough? As I was indicating a little bit earlier, that we as citizens interact, the sphere of government that we interact with mostly is local government. Do members of Parliament do their share in terms of holding organizations such as SALGA accountable and local government in general?
Okay. No, firstly, I have to start, thank you very much, Titi. I have to start with the origins, that SALGA as a construct of an association of municipalities is the success and victory of civic organization on the ground in the country, in the struggle for freedom in this country. It's a very important part of that process. We should not underestimate the intention to have what we called then genuine democratic governance to be put into place, contrasting with what used to happen in the past. It was a shared kind of democratic stuff. So the association and the role it has continued to play to contribute to consolidating individual municipalities and the functions they have, as in the law, has been a critical one. But also playing the voice, as has been said already, in providing perspectives from a municipal government level. Because in the absence of that, the kind of legislation would actually be very problematic. We'll say something about this later on. No, in fact, on a regular basis, both committees of parliament of different kinds do interact with municipalities for a variety of reasons. The NCOP has an annual, with SALGA has an annual local government week, but this is in addition to going out to each of the province, in different parts of each province, to interact directly, not only with councils, but also with communities in those areas to get feedback directly from people about the work of municipalities. So if we claim as a country to have had success over a variety of issues, we are talking about the role of local government. And my favorite expression is what SALGA dropped, the three interlocking circles that represent the interrelated, interdependent, yet distinct spheres of government. So when we talk about the success of SALGA, we must remember we are talking also partly about the success of the support from national and provincial, inadequate, as I can say, openly here, as it has been. But otherwise, that part of work has been useful. Of course, there are challenges that has emerged, difficult problems that we will talk about.
Okay. Now that I've allowed all of my panelists to have your opening remarks, so to say, please feel free at any point henceforth to jump in at any point of the conversation. You outlined, Nkadimeng, your successes, what it is that is worth celebrating in the past 20 years. How do we actually measure the success of a body such as SALGA? How do we actually measure the success of local government in general, given the fact, as you made that example of that trip between Polokwane and Turf, back in the days, the difference that local government has made and a democratic government is visible. However, it is also true that you are starting from a very, very low base, So how do you measure success then, knowing that basically you're talking about providing services to people who before never knew any services, who never cared for government, never provided any services for?
We're actually starting from a zero base,
Absolutely.
not even a low base, a zero base. Considering what we were saying at the institutionalization of the sphere itself, we had to incorporate areas which were not even equal. In other areas, they already been receiving services. In other areas, we were starting from a zero base. But the overall population was almost at about zero base in terms of access to any service which was basic. Now, the greatest measure on how me and you and any listener will not argue on will be going to our Stats SA records. I mean, it's a barometer where after every period, they will go out and measure what was your baseline and how have you gone. So when I'm saying 97% of our communities today have electricity, had it not been a moving target, I suppose would have been at 100%. But population evolves, people develop, and children grow, and start their own settlement, whether formal or informal, and then you have got to chase that target. But have we been able to deal with the backlog? In most instances, yes. So that's the greatest measure of how we could be able to get from the baseline what we have inherited, what we have established after incorporation of all the TLCs which were operating at the time, establishment, and beginning putting work at the table and ensuring that the spaces that we live and lead are different.
So maybe just to make the point that in addition to what the President is saying, I think for obvious reasons the measure of performance of any sphere of government has got an infrastructure and service delivery bias. So I want to suggest that it's also multi-layered. It's a significant component what the President is articulating. But I think there are soft victories around the democratization of space, the inscription of new voices, the fact that people can relate almost on a first-name basis with their representatives. It's the only sphere of government where there's direct elections of your representatives. So a combination of proportional and just direct representation. I think it's something that should not be underestimated. So you have a scenario that is finding greater levels of preponderance, the presence of, if you like, independent actors in the space, primarily because communities have faith in these individuals. Outside the political machinations, the manifestation of choices as a result of political affiliation. I think it's an important part because I think communities now know that we are able to actualize the requirement of a democratic local government, and also mechanisms such as ward committees, just ordinary people representing organized voices in a ward are able to have an expression in council, obviously through processes as determined by council. So I'm just saying those are, if you like, soft victories that gets to be underestimated, but they are significant in the space, if you like. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, before you just before you jump in there, Deputy Speaker, let me just remind our listeners that those you are tuned to a special broadcast here of Power Business, celebrating 20 years of democratic local government with the South African Local Government Association that itself is celebrating 20 years in existence. If you're just joining us on Capricorn and on Power 98.7, I have my panelists this evening being the President of SALGA, Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng. We've got the Deputy Minister of Co-operative, Mr. Pat Tau, and Dr. Sputla Ramakgopa, we just heard from a moment ago. And now there's here from the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. You did a great job there, by the way, of outlining the history and also the relationship that exists between SALGA and the National Assembly. And I'm going to allow you to make your point, and I also want to as you listen to this one, Mr. Tau, just to also, a question I'd like to pose to you as well is about the relationship between national government at co-operative level and provincial government at co-operative level, and how that actually works in practice, or how it's supposed to and what happens in practice. Let me recognize you there, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Titi. Thank you for recognizing me here. No, I wanted to say that there are certain valuable things when we go up slightly on top of the hill to look at what we are doing. You see, in many countries, you don't have local government. If it exists as a creature of legislation. So the minister can wake up in the morning with part of this team and it's gone, it's dead, doesn't exist anymore. Or they recreate something else altogether and so on. But also the authority that it has over its functions is unique. And the reality that for the 4 iterations of local government elections have been successful, okay? And we made this point early on, but in addition to that, there has been an interesting observation that the number of people who are participating at local government election, unusually in South Africa. In South Africa, it's higher, it's going higher. Mama Bulo was suggesting they are even higher than that. Usually, local government elections are around 48, 50. That's where it generally is. To be at 58 and having repeated it is a measure of an interesting, in my opinion, of the interaction of local residents with municipalities and a recognition of the authority they know they have to even change their representatives. That's a very important political exercise that others elsewhere, they envy South Africa for having that kind of system. At least that's one observation I thought is worth celebrating, if there's anything here.
All right. All right, let's also mention, as I come to the question that I had posed, and I'll give you an opportunity, Mr. Dao, to respond to, about the relationship that exists between National Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and that at provincial level.
Well, firstly, the two departments, that is between province and national, have a dual responsibility to, amongst others, support local government in exercising its executive obligations. And I'm choosing the words deliberately because, building up on what the Deputy Speaker said, the responsibilities of local government in the country are derived directly from the Constitution. So it is not delegated in essence. So the responsibility, therefore, of province and national is to support local government to do what the Constitution enjoins local government to do. And in that, we undertake the responsibilities jointly in terms of oversight of the work that's done by local government, providing the legislative framework. Some of the legislation is done at the provincial level, some of it is done at the national level, providing the necessary grants and systems that enable local government to execute its obligations. So some of the resources for local government comes directly from the national sphere of government. But our design of local government is such that it is intended that it generate the bulk of its own revenue with some support from national and provincial government. So some of these resources are transferred directly to local government. They participate in, for example, the national tax base. Local government gets a share, and I'm sure the president of SALGA will continue to say, as all presidents of SALGA have said, it's not enough. I'm now on the other side. When I left, she said, you are going to the darker side.
You are one of them now.
One of them. In fact, she did it on the first day. But so in essence, I'm saying that national government has to transfer part of the taxes to local government. It's standing at 9% right now, but the argument has always been that, in fact, we need to increase that share. And it's not a discussion that national government has ignored. I can confirm that it is an issue that's firmly on the table of both National Treasury and COCTA to say, how do we review the fiscal framework to enable local government to improve the way it functions?
Let's reflect on what the President spoke of. That's the President of the Republic in his opening.
Let there be no confusion.
Let us just be clear about that. Hey, we've got presidents of football clubs these days as well. You know, we've got to be very clear about what president you are referring to. In fact, I still maintain there should only be one president in the country. Without due respect to all the other presidents, to avoid confusion. But let's talk about what he reflected on in his opening remarks. And that was obviously the challenges that are faced by local government in this country, which were, you know, so laid bare repeatedly by the Auditor General's report on an annual basis. You know, the declining audit outcomes, the serious challenges with governance and financial management. If you, in a nutshell, you know, as SALGA, the body that has to support local government, how do you sum up what actually is where the source of these challenges is, the real source of it? It's very easy on a superficial basis to say corruption, you know, is what's leading to the challenges there. But what, in your experience, and as people with first-hand experience in dealing with local government or municipalities, what is actually the cause of this?
And I think I like the part where, firstly, you deal with how we generally, as a public and a people, just superficially says every municipality or the sphere is generally corrupt. whilst if you take a step back, you will look, much as you have enacted, you have put up acts, there were some areas which were in the 20 years, one could say you have been testing them. And we have developed areas where we realize now we need an upgrade. Local government, for example, is over-regulated. And that's one of the areas which makes it difficult for municipalities to be able to comply with all the boxes that the AG needs to tick, without a cent missing. Forget about the corruption which is linked to a disappearance of funds, which is what generally we look at. But you find that, for example, an introduction of M-Score. There are almost around 97, Deputy Speaker. You will remind me, in our national week, we looked into what is it, even if it's a municipality of 9 councillors, what are they supposed to deal with on a day-to-day as they procure, as they supply service? Are they able to do that in a meaningful way that will be satisfactory according to the rules and regulations that are there? Some of the problems are systemic. They are not necessarily an establishment or a creation of human beings, but it's how the system integrates with what needs to be done on a day-to-day basis to provide the services and the leadership that we need to do at local municipalities. Quite a number of them have been isolated and have been brought to the fore for us to be able to deal with them and move away from the superficial nature of the discussion which says you are unable to deal with accountability at local government.
One word, obviously, that comes up repeatedly as well when we're dealing with challenges facing municipalities and local government, we hear about capacity issues. And since I'm dealing here with people who are all from one party, last I checked, that also comes down to decisions that are made at a political level. And I would love to know from, and any one of you can jump onto this one, that as the ANC, where do your strongest, and by strongest I mean from a competence point of view, whether it be qualifications, experience, or whatever, where do most of those experienced cadres sit? Why is it that we say local government, that's where service delivery, that's the touch point of service delivery for most of us? Why is it that if that's the case, that where most citizens interact with government, we don't find the strongest, and I use the word strongest for lack of a better word, but in terms of from a capacity point of view, that we don't find the strongest deployees of the ANC at that level?
Can I just respond, and then I'd like
Absolutely.
to. Yeah. The first point is the 20 years in any country is minuscule in terms of period of development. When
I use a football analogy, we're on a learning curve like Bafana.
Please, you see, when you get to that complex subject, let me not go into that.
Local government is probably easier to solve.
No, I'm suggesting that one of the at the subjective level, one of the problems that we're confronted with is that coming into government, what began to happen was that the transition, some of the examples that you hear former mayors talking about here, the successes. I used to participate in giving awards in the Free State to good performing municipalities that used to be given awards for good practice. And these were young fellows. Some of them were not as old as you would have expected. I remember Gugile Mkwinti, as MEC for local government, visiting me in the Free State. Says, where are the councillors? He was in a SALGA type meeting, but it was called by us together with him. Because he says, this looks like a meeting of the Youth League, he was saying, young people. But the creative approach to local government as handled then during that period, from the pre-interim to the interim, the civic experiences of those who entered local government seems to have been particularly very good. But what began to happen is that the system, as you go into the province and into the national, and the opportunities there began to attract. People left local government and went into this. Over time, the discontinuity, the changes of people who get into local government has shifted dramatically. So there are people who have chosen, they'd rather go into something else other than local government. Many of the initial entrance into local government was out of passion for local politics and local solving problems and stuff like that. That system is changing. There are changes that are affecting at a municipal level, but also at a provincial and at a national level, including in the media, TT, by the way. So you can sit there in Parliament and look at the press gallery and look at the people who are now sitting there. Their age, their profiles is very different. Some of us who have been there like old finisher stick out like a sore thumb who've been there, including those in the media. So those changes in the number of the kind of people who enter local government is a problem. You are right. Political parties are agents of change, for good or for bad.
Absolutely.
So if political parties do not handle the management of those kind of areas, both administratively, because no political party, self-respecting political party, will not want its best cadres to do work inside government and carry out its objectives. Objectively speaking, it doesn't exist. Borrain was here telling us that a week after a new political party took over Cape Town, he was kicked out in under a week because he belonged to a wrong party and so on. So no party does not want to have its best to go into there. But now there are dynamics that has to be managed that are of a different kind that confronts political parties now, all of us. And that's the challenge that we are facing. The consequences of strengthening in the party will overflow into governance across the board.
Okay. You wanted to jump
so I wanted to make the point that there's two parts to the conversation. So the Deputy Speaker responds to the political leadership. I want to respond to the bureaucratic component.
Yes.
Assuming that there's a healthy relationship with regards to the administrative and political interface, if you like. So there's no interference. So what are some of these objective considerations? They are as follows, at least I've come to understand them better now, is that you find that there are spaces, especially your more rural, poorer local authorities, they are not in a position to attract the kind of high caliber marquee skills that you'll find in the more affluent metropolitan areas. Because here you are able to pay better, the conditions of living are better. I'm able to take my kids to some of the best schools. The provision of infrastructure is completely different from the rural spaces. So the poorer local authorities are unable to attract those kinds of skills. And yet they are expected in terms of the levels of over-regulation in the space to also perform at the same level as the ones you find in your metropolitan areas. Then the second one is that you find that these local authorities don't necessarily have a revenue-based. I mean, I visited one municipality. I will not mention it here in the KZN. So what it has is huge backlogs. I think the levels of universal coverage, so I'm talking of provision of water at the household level, at the right quantities, right quality at the time that is required, is sitting at about 35%. And yet there are municipal infrastructure grants, so this is an allocation from a national level that helps them to resolve the infrastructure issues. It's sitting at 33 million rand per annum. So that's quite a huge disparity. So one of the biggest problems that is confronting local authorities is around financial viability, sustainability. And I'm talking pre-COVID dispensation. What COVID has done is to accentuate an already existing situation. Those spaces are becoming more and more depressed. So you are going to find situations that in fact, the position that the local authorities were confronted with pre-COVID is going to become extremely more accentuated. So I'm just saying that there are those objective considerations. Obviously, there are subjective issues that's about deployment and so on and so forth, which requires the attention of the ruling elites. But I'm just saying they are confronted with these real problems.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that one because ironically I asked this question and you have just you are in the process of the opposite transition in terms of what I was saying about capacity and the most skilled, most experienced people finding themselves in national government, and yet we say local government is actually where service delivery takes place. Now you are making the opposite move. From moving from national government, moving to local government, if we can find you a seat. But you know what I'm saying? So what's your take on that? On how you politically, the capacity is distributed?
Well, it hasn't been equitable in many ways. And I think that we found that there's greater emphasis on the metropolitan municipalities in terms of capacity and skill, and the larger municipalities, intermediary municipalities. And we've witnessed situations where senior people have been assigned from national government and provincial government to go into local government. We've experienced it in Joburg when the Honorable Masondo came to Joburg. He had been an MEC for health in Gauteng. In Tshwane, Mayor Mkachwa, Mayor Ramakgopa, the previous Ramakgopa before, Sputla Ramakgopa.
Nepotism.
What it is. But both of them had come directly from national government. In fact, they had been serving as deputy ministers in that area. So there is a degree of emphasis when you go into the larger municipalities of sharing the responsibility. It is the smaller municipalities that suffer the most for a whole range of reasons, including the level of responsibility, including the level of resources at their disposal, but also basic issues of remuneration. So like in any other employer, when you are moved from one sphere to the other, there are remuneration issues that happen. Not particularly between province and national. I'm not arguing for salary here. But when it comes to local government, there's a real issue. And it's a real issue about how we incentivize people to go into the local government system. And this is not, and some of this is about identifying the appropriate capacity, but also it's about the narrative that we've built around our local government system. So in certain instances, people simply don't have the incentive to want to go. Yes. You know, when I was in Joburg, we struggled for 3 years to recruit a CFO. And essentially, most of the CFOs, competent CAs said, you know what, I don't want to mess up my reputation. Because when I go in there, the first thing they're going to tell me is there's a billing system, the billing problems, there's an audit problem, there's this problem. So I don't want to mess up my reputation, so I don't want to go there. In most instances, you're finding that it's people that have been in local government that are prepared to go back in, but a lot of people have kind of said, I don't want to mess up my own reputation. And it takes a few conscientious people that say, well, I'm prepared to go in. But and part of the discussion I think we should have is actually what does local government do? What is the responsibility of a municipality? Because when we're talking about our municipalities in the public discourse, we're talking about the problem areas. In my mind, it starts from the morning, from the time you wake up and you kind of switch on your light, you've just engaged with your municipality.
Absolutely.
When you've had your shower, you've just engaged with your municipality. If the water is warm, it's okay, but if there's no electricity for the water to be warm, then there's something with the municipality that's wrong. But on the day-to-day basis that you experience the service, you don't actually interface, you don't think that I'm interfacing with my municipality, I'm engaged in my daily life. But a municipality is also responsible for managing the urban fabric in a context like this. And I'll use the space that we're in here now, Sandton. 20 years ago, Sandton was just about growing, but it had major sewer problems. It had major road problems. So for it to grow to the level that it is dependent on a municipality prepared to invest in the infrastructure that supports Sandton to grow. for it to be able to accommodate the buildings that are here, dependent on a municipality making decisions around density, around floor area, around height of buildings. It's a conscious municipal decision. It's municipalities that are responsible for the quality of the built environment and the nature of our built environment. In fact, the municipality is responsible for ensuring that even the aesthetic of the city. At some point there was a problem with Joburg is having too many Tuscan-style houses. And the municipality had to develop a
I was one of those who was complaining as well.
Yeah. And the municipality responded. It developed a policy that discouraged Tuscan-style developments because it is responsible for the aesthetic of the city. So the level and extent of responsibility of the municipality is about everything that happens in that space, from the roads to the sewer networks, to the sanitation, to the buildings, to the quality of buildings, to ensuring, because the municipality has to pass that this building is erected. And if it is not erected according to the right standards, it is the building inspector and the municipality that's accountable. But we don't always take that into account when we're talking about the capacity and the work that's done by our municipalities. Of course, we shouldn't discount the problems that we have in the system, but we also need to acknowledge the broader array of responsibilities of local government in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think just
before you jump in there, because I want to give you ample time to also have your say on this one. In fact, I want to add one to you because I think you are probably best placed to reflect honestly and brutally honestly on this, and that's the issue of maybe, the municipalities, like they just simply aren't viable. I was just reading an article earlier about a municipality in the Eastern Cape where basically it's an amalgamation of four municipalities that is also basically on the verge of collapse due to the debt burden there. So that even the redemarcating municipality is not even addressing that issue of a sustainability and viability of our municipalities. And that's one I'd like to bring you on to get the discussion going on that one as well. But just to say that as we approach news time, you tune to a special broadcast here of Power Business on Power 98.7 and also on Capricorn. We are going to be carrying on into the next hour where we'll also change tack a little bit and also involve you. You can join our conversation as well on 0861987000. And we do have also some delegates and members that are participating in the conference today that are with us here at the venue in Sandton, and we'll invite them as well to join in. And my colleague Eldrin Sampier will also be facilitating that. That's what we'll focus on. And also start to direct the conversation as well, as we've seen the 20 years so far. We can celebrate it all we like, but what does the future hold? How are we going to change this narrative and deal with the problems that are currently, or the challenges, and not the crises, as no politicians are loath to call them crises. It's not a crisis, it's a challenge. So we'll deal with those challenges. How do we address them for the next 20 years? So stay with us as we celebrate 20 years of local government. It is now 7 o'clock.
And in your top stories this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa is to address the nation this evening on amendments to the risk-adjusted strategy into the festive season. And former Eskom CEO Matsela Gogo is this evening back on the stand at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Good evening, I'm Ananda Homo. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to address the nation at 8 o'clock. This comes after a special sitting of Cabinet that considered recommendations of the National Coronavirus Command Council earlier this week. This meeting came on the backdrop of concerns raised over the resurgence reported in the Eastern and Western Capes and the figures of infections that are likely to emerge post-festive holiday season. An increase of 65 was recorded to COVID-19 related fatalities over the past 24 hours to bring the final figure to 21,709. The highest number to infections at just over 4,000 was recorded over the same period, taking that tally to 796,472. Power 98.7 will be bringing you that address live as soon as it gets underway. In other news, former Eskom CEO Matsela Gogo is this evening back on the stand at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, detailing developments during his tenure at the embattled power utility. Gogo was suspended together with 3 other Eskom executives in 2015. He's appearing after Eskom board chairperson Zola Tsotsi described how the suspension of the executives triggered mass instability at Eskom, leading to successive bouts of load shedding.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aldrin St-Pierre. I just quickly want to give you a heads up on how we're going to be taking questions. So on your tables, there are mics. As you can see on the table, there are mics. If you have a question, just put your hand up. And when I have identified you, then all you do is press the button in front of the mic. The mic will then turn red, and then you can go ahead, make your comment and question. I'd prefer that you also introduce yourself, please, before you make the comment or ask the question. And when you're done, please press the button again, because otherwise the other speakers won't be able to speak. And the deputy speaker will be very angry. And he knows how this works, right? Honorable member, don't do that. Don't do that. So any moment from now, ladies and gentlemen.
While a response was received today, it is aggrieved by the length of time it took as well as the contents of that response. Pamela says that they're forging ahead with a sit-in to communicate their displeasure with the treatment of workers in the country on a range of issues.
On the 7th of October, we marched demanding a response from the President. We have received a letter today responding to this grievance that we had submitted, but we are continuing because we are angry that it took such a long time for the President to acknowledge the anger and the frustration of the workers. Secondly, in the letter, there are no resolutions. There are no solutions to all of the myriad of grievances that we've been raising. We want real answers. Workers have been patient for far too long.
And UMSA members are set to descend on the Centurion headquarters of state arms manufacturer DNL, demanding the full payment of workers' salaries. The union says there are 13 checks still outstanding and that only 10 to 60% of workers' salaries have been paid over the past few months. The union's Phakamile Hlobi-Majola says that they're demanding that DNL pay outstanding salaries for the months of May, June, July and August, stop the Section 189 processes and retrenchments, as well as fire the board.
The ANC government is a delinquent shareholder and it has failed to take decisive action to deal with the financial crisis at DNL and all other SOEs. It has appointed incompetent people to the board and these people have failed to turn the entity around. DNL, like SAA, SA Express and Eskom, has been brought to its knees by the Department of Enterprises as shareholder. And this is why we say that government has strangled the strategic SOE.
In your weather for tomorrow, Gauteng is expected to be fine with temperatures peaking at 25 degrees in Johannesburg, 27 in Pretoria and 26 in Vereeniging. Recapping the top story in Power News this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa is to address the nation this evening on amendments to the risk-adjusted strategy going into the festive season.
Power News. Celebrating the 20 years of democratic local government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7.
Local government elections next year have to happen, but they have to happen in circumstances of good health, in circumstances where there is no possibility of significant cross-infection of people. So we are monitoring the situation. We are pulling all stops to ensure that our staff is fully kitted in PPE. The voting stations that are used are properly prepared, and that those who want to enlist to be voters or those who have changed addresses be given the opportunity to make those changes.
Celebrating the 20 years of democratic local government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7.
Did you know that plastic pollution threatens human life and the ecosystem? Plastic is found in almost everything, from plastic bags, bottles, straws, and much more. However, it is not environmentally friendly. It takes centuries to degrade and ends up dumped carelessly on the ground before ending up in the ocean, where it threatens sea life. This is an urgent call to all of us to get into the habit of saying no to single-use plastic bags at the till and keeping your own bags in your handbag or car. Cut down on single-use plastic products like plastic straws. And when you need water, opt for reusable water bottles. A message brought to you by the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries.
On FM, online, and DSTV channel 889. This is Power 98.7. Celebrating the 20 years of democratic local government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7.
25 years ago, South Africans went to the polls for the very first time to elect their local government representatives and councillors for the various municipalities for the first time ever in a democratic society. That was 25 years ago. And 20 years ago, the South African Local Government Association came into existence, and that is why we are having this special broadcast of Power Business this evening. We are here at the Members' Assembly of SALGA celebrating 20 years of local government. A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us on Power 98.7 and on Capricorn. By the way, if for any reason you have to be away from your radio, you can also follow the conversation on our YouTube channel and on our various social media platforms. So before the break there, we were talking around the issues of, just before the break, we were talking about issues of capacity at local government level, and the Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng, who's also president of the South African Local Government Association, part of my 4-member panel. Let me maybe just reintroduce them for the benefit of you who's just joined us. Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng, president of SALGA with us, and also the Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governments and Traditional Affairs, Mr. Pakstau, and also have with us the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and Lechesa Tsenoli, and the Head of the Investment and Infrastructure in the President's Office, that is Dr. Sputla Ramakgopa. I'm sure he's the only official at that level of government who rolls by a nickname, a Dr. Sputla. So he's completely dropped the Khosiensu vibe. All right. Let me give you, Councillor Nkadimeng, an opportunity to respond. You wanted to weigh in on that issue of capacity.
Yeah, I wanted to weigh in, but I also will take the addition that you made in terms of viability of municipalities. And I will actually possibly dwell there more than the capacity, because my colleagues have touched on it very well. Revenue raising assumption of local government was saying every municipality must raise 90% of its revenue from its people or from its residents. Now, you are talking today, you are saying there are rural municipalities which have got no revenue base at all, zero. And secondly, you find that they are allocation is at around 35%. Sputla was making an example here that they will receive around 30 million to provide the host of all of those services, because our people are urbanized now. All of them want electricity. All of them want water from their household. So there's no street connection that is acceptable by standard of what our people want. Now, this is what is legislated. What does it mean? It means we may have to go back and review. And this is what leads to these amalgamations which you were talking about. Chair of the demarcation board is here, former chairperson of SALGA, Bob Manyon. Their responsibility, amongst other things, is to try as much as they can to create municipalities which will be wall-to-wall but sustainable and economically viable. But me and you knows, in some areas of KZN, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, it's just not possible. What would you combine Musina with in Polokwane? The edge, the border, it's Zimbabwe, down, you are moving towards Njelele, Collins, there's just nothing that you can do which will generate revenue for that municipality. They will only be waiting for the allocation from national government. Now, secondly, you talk about those municipalities, you want capacity. You are a chartered accountant, you're looking for an opportunity, and Collins Chabane Municipality advertises a post of a chief financial officer. It's graded level 3. And you are thinking, should I leave home? There's no school for your children, there's no tar road, there's no water, there's nothing that attracts. There's also not even anything that seems to cushion and assist you. Your nearest town is Makado, what we call Louis Trichardt, and is over 100 kilometers away. Even if you look into the practicality of commuting children on a day-to-day basis to school and accessing a basic like buying food, it becomes difficult.
Absolutely.
So it means we may have to relook and say not only the sector is not attractive, but are we making it attractive in line with what the legislation says, collect. If you don't collect, nothing extra more you get when you are a small municipality. When you are graded low as well, a metro is level 8, I think. They are way above a chief CFO there, a CA will get around 1.8 to 2M. In Polokwane municipality, you'll get 1.2. But when you advertise, even in areas which you think are now attractive in terms of accessibility of quite a number of things and relatively convenient, it is becoming difficult for people to move from metros and urban areas into local areas. So I think those are areas which we may have to look into, touch when they touch on legislation, but also touch on developmental of the areas together with the fast-paced support from government to enhance
realities that we often don't reflect in conversations about challenges facing local government. All right, I would like to open up the conversation at this point as well to you as well on 0861 987 000. You can send in your questions or comments. Actually, let's make it a question, make it nice and brief. You can cut out the preamble and just go straight for the point that you want to make so that we can get in as many people as we can in the 17 minutes or so that we have for this particular segment. And Aldrin Sampia will be managing that as well. And as far as those who are with us here at the Radisson Blue, and just indicate with your hand that he will manage that process of how you ask the questions. Make use of those microphones that are in the interest, of course, being COVID safe. Use the microphones that are on the tables there. And over to you, Aldrin Sampia, otherwise known as Adrian Simpiwe.
Yes, indeed. That is me. That is me. Thank you guys so much for being part of this conversation. And I have to say that I hope that this is something that doesn't end here, that it happens more often. Maybe sibizo umphakathi uyakhuluma, ne? Umphakathi uyakhuluma. And also, what the President just raised now is a conversation that we had this morning as well on Power Talk about how do you make sure that rural municipalities become lucrative? Because what happens is that the municipality itself, as well as the government in that province, would have invested in a child, and that child goes through school, right, from the budget of that province and from the budget of that municipality. That child then becomes equipped. That child has a skill, that child is talented. But what happens is that that child leaves that municipality that child is born from, and that child goes and rebuild Gauteng, rebuild a Johannesburg. But then December ubuyela kuphi? Ubuyela ekhaya. Makabuyela ekhaya, tries to turn on the tap and there is no water. Or tries to turn on the tap or the water is dirty. But mind you, that child is so talented and has made it all the way to the top. And by the way, I'm one of those. I'm from Bronville in Welkom, the Free State. But I had to leave Bronville to become what I am today, because there's no chance that I would have made it if I'd stayed in the Free State. So the question is, how do we make sure that those municipalities and those areas as well become lucrative. So ladies and gentlemen, please put up your hand if you have any questions. So I will come to you. And there's also a mic on your table, as I've indicated earlier on. Just press the mic and then you ask your question. I just quickly want to take some of the questions that we got from our listeners earlier on, and you can be part of the conversation as well by tweeting at Power987. So there is a tweet here from Boni Paleng who says that since the formation of SALGA, what efforts have been made to fight corruption, nepotism, and laziness, especially when it comes to late payments of SMMEs and poor service delivery? I'd like the panelists to please take note of some of those questions. Another one here from Khabo who says, should we not be having informal settlements if government spatial planning was up to speed? Status A and its censors should assist with the planning. Okay, and then I'm going to take one question from our audience here, and then we're going to give it over to the panelists just to respond to that, and then we'll come back again. You can go ahead, sir.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah. Just quickly introduce yourself as well.
Okay, my name is Thembi Nkadimeng. I'm from Business Day TV, actually. My first question is with regards to Soweto. I mean, SALGA is 20 years. 25 years later, the problems of Soweto have not been resolved. I'll tell you, I personally had an experience. I know Mr. Tau, when you were still a mayor of Johannesburg. You know, this will be an experience of many people who have tried to make life and, you know, go to the suburbs. If you go there to the customer service, if you've got challenges, people, they will tell you that you, the people in the suburbs, you are actually subsidizing the people of Soweto. And the people, they even tell you, the staff, they will even give an attitude. They say, if you can't make it, if you can't be able to pay for your rates in the suburbs, go back to Soweto. This is a big problem. Soweto is a problem, and it's a problem for the whole country. And I mean, we are talking about a mine. I mean, this is a mine, so it is a mine in terms of the revenue potential. That is and I don't know whether there is no political will, but I'm just asking SALGA, what is SALGA doing? Secondly, my second question is about you mentioned a challenge of smaller municipalities in terms of revenue. There was a case at Standerton municipality. I can't remember whether I think it was with the. Is it Astral Foods? Yes, Astral Foods needs water to be able to perform their services. And the municipality was strangling the performance of the company. And what is SALGA saying about that? Thank you. Those are my two questions.
Okay, over to you.
Okay, who wants to go first to respond to the questions? I think the first one was around what is SALGA doing to fight corruption. Yeah, just having read that in the context as well, I think it was at your last NEC meeting where you spoke of the consequence and accountability framework for municipalities in South Africa.
Okay, I'll start here. I'll start there. It's one of the efforts that we've made in terms of putting up a draft of a consequence framework. But this question also needs to be aligned with what we early defined, what are the core responsibilities of SALGA. You know, maybe it calls for the association, but also the deputy speaker for the review on what are some of the key issues we need to do. Because that comes out of a desire from SALGA in terms of peer review mechanisms. What do we want ourselves as municipalities to say when we are sitting amongst one another? Do we carry a responsibility of ensuring a lack of or no maladministration or corruption? And we realize that in each and every sector, when it's professionalized, there are strong elements of peer review mechanism. And it's in that context that we look into saying, if we are sitting as 257 mayors in a particular room in South Africa, what do we want to the image of local government, and how do we want to turn it around? And I think that will go a long way in assisting all our endeavors as a country to deal with corruption and maladministration. But there are no structures in South Africa that I've heard of which can stand up and say we are for corruption. So obviously, as an association, we equally are not for corruption, and this is a giant and a bold step, which we are working together with COCTA to finalize the framework, which will then become a guideline and a no to corruption on a bold front. Let me also talk to the issue of small municipalities, the example which was made in Standerton. You know, my hometown is Bethel. That's where I was born and bred. It's around 70 kilometers to the plant that you are talking about. So I know it in person. I'm not sure when was the last time you were in Standerton or in Bethel, where I come from, where there's no revenue, there's nothing. The only form of employment, there are three. You are a nurse, you are a police. There are 3 big prisons, 2 big prisons there. You either belong to the Department of Justice and Correctional Services, and that's it. There are potholes even in town. Actually, they are no longer called potholes, they are pathholes. Because of the levels of the systems that we are talking about. So you need a strong element of cooperation, of economic development that is driven from a provincial level. In fact, that municipality now, if I'm not wrong, Likwa, is under Section 139, with the province assisting them to be able to carry some of these basic problems. But the specific questions and a problem of that example is bulk supply. The municipality having a responsibility of reticulation. So if the bulk is not strong, which are other systemic problems that municipalities face, very few people know that the water board must provide or bring water in bulk to a municipality for its reticulation. But when the chicken factory closes, everyone says the municipality is not providing water, when they equally are not receiving sufficiently. Of course, there are challenges that they are unable to pay the water authority, including ESCOM, which is a problem which is linked to the revenue assumption. Such types of questions takes us into also as communities understanding the critical role of what municipalities are about, what are they legislated to do, and how can we best harmonize. You know, 4 houses of councillors there were banned in that township because communities never even understood that it's the board that is supposed to bring water. Who becomes the immediate enemy is a councillor who's staying in the street, who lost the house for a responsibility in a way that is not his or hers. But I think such debates and discussions need to come. So they will deal with.
Yeah. Just a comment on just a comment on what Aldrin was saying. Obviously, he makes a comment, but I'm going to just reposition it as a question. So essentially, at the heart of his argument is the issue around urbanization. So let me start by saying the following, that urbanization is a global phenomenon. It's rampant, and there's nothing wrong about urbanization, by the way. And I think predictions and projections are suggesting that Africa is going to become more urbanized over a period of time. It's the least urbanized of all continents in the world. But this is the point I want to make, is just to understand the sources of that urbanization. So if you look at the global north, urbanization there was as a result of opportunities that presented themselves in those urban spaces. So people were moving into opportunities. Urbanization that is happening in the country is as a result of pushing factors in the rural area. So there are no opportunities. They come into the urban space, not necessarily coming into opportunities, but essentially holding on to the greater prospects of finding opportunities in the urban space. And that gives rise to the proliferation of informal settlements. And I guess that Soweto is a metaphor of that rampant urbanization and the infill densification, that even despite the amount of infrastructure built there, you are unable to resolve a problem because of the rate of urbanization. So part of the solution that government is fashioning, and I'm sure the DM can respond that with greater levels of authority and be more prolific about the answer, is this issue around the district development model. So coordination along the 3 spheres of government. So it's a vertical coordination and a horizontal coordination. And part of the argument there is what the president is raising, just the provision of bulk infrastructure and resolving what we call the the network industries, water, energy, transportation, and the provision of ICT infrastructure. Once you are able to resolve those questions, then you are likely going to retain greater levels of investments into those spaces. Obviously, in the rural spaces, the configuration of the economy will be primarily agricultural. But if you are able to provide sufficient energy supply, reliability of water, you are going to ensure that the beneficiation, value addition is upstream of the value chain, and therefore you are able to create opportunities in those spaces. For as long as we have the current configuration, you are not going to resolve this problem. So it's important that this dialogue continues and, in fact, matures into actual policy positions on how we help municipalities to provide the bulk.
You articulated so beautifully, Dr. Ramakgopa, but it just always surprises me that it almost as if you've just described this urbanization as an international phenomenon, but it's almost as if we were completely caught by surprise by it here, given how we've responded to it in South Africa. But that's, nevertheless,
there's a born and bred thing that's happening.
Yeah, I tell you.
I think Soweto epitomizes what is actually a national problem. Certainly Soweto symbolizes it in very stark terms, but it is a national problem. Now let's talk about it from the revenue point of view in relation to both local government and ESCOM. If you think about it, local government at this stage is owed in excess of 191 billion rand. Not by Soweto alone, but nationally.
Yes.
It is owed in excess of 191 billion at the last count, which last count was actually in June. So we're actually exceeding now 200 billion. And this is owed by government. It is owed by business.
Government is part of the problem.
Government is part of the problem. It is owed by business, and it is also owed by residences. Of course, the bulk of the debt is from those residents that don't pay. Now, part of the mandate that's been given to the Deputy President as he chairs the ESCOM task team is to address the revenue problem. We have developed a comprehensive set of proposals on addressing the revenue problem that has both carrot and stick. It's premature to talk about what it is, but we're looking at carrot and stick and say, how do we resolve this problem about this 191 billion? Because we have to resolve it once and for all. It's 191 billion foregone by local government, but it's also 191 billion foregone by residents in terms of services, in terms of the services that they receive from local government. So that's one part of the issue. The second part of the issue coming to the urbanization issue is, if you look at it from a service delivery point of view. Now, how does the electricity distribution system work in the country? It works on the basis of a supply agreement between the service provider and ESCOM. So even internally in ESCOM, there's a supply agreement between generation, transmission, and the distribution section in ESCOM. Now, we've had major electricity problems in Soweto. Over and above the load shedding that we experience, Soweto is experiencing in excess of electricity disruption. And what's the problem? It is the backyard shacks. It is the backyard rooms that have been built because ESCOM says we're going to supply you so much electricity. It is the responsibility of the distributor to ensure that they manage what is agreed to. And part of what we need to resolve is how do we solve this problem? Because what's happening in local government now is that they are penalized. You get the same electricity and it's demanded, people demand their electricity, correctly so.
Right.
If you use more than you are supplied or are required to be supplied, there's a penalty imposed. And that penalty comes with interest, and the interest is prime plus 5, and it compounds. This is compounding the problem of local government. So the issues in themselves are that complex that they require a plethora of solutions to deal with the issues that local government faces.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to come back to you now, Aldrin, for more questions from the floor and from our listeners. But I know I've been skipping you, Honorable Deputy Speaker, and I don't want to get in your bad books. So please have your go.
No, I said earlier that we were naive at some stage when we argued one city, one tax base in the campaigning to create new local government systems. soon as we got into government, we realized that, it struck us, hey, that no. In fact, the correct slogan is one country, one tax base. And what resulted from that is what we now partly referred to both equitable share as well as the municipal infrastructure grant. Now, that municipal infrastructure grant, incidentally, did not exist. It existed as separate grants for a variety of things and so on. But its pulling together into a single grant was in recognition that this local authority is a political structure that has responsibility for accountability to local residents. So it must have resources to decide which infrastructure it pays for and uses and where, so that there is relationship with the resources available and what gets done. So that it's not just dependent from resources from elsewhere only without them having any say. So that was an important progress, and it's been growing over a period of time in recognition of that. Let me say this about the urban dynamics. We developed what we called an urban development framework. And that policy framework, one of its chapters deals with the urban and rural development frameworks. Okay. Now, the reality is that studies have shown that where you talk about incapacity, whether it's municipalities or schools or any institutions, those coincide with the poorest parts in the country. Okay? And so the implications is that the role of the state is critical in undoing the weaknesses that arises from location. And if the state as a whole does not play that role, effective pulling together of resources in areas with the weakest tax base, it will not make an impact in any way. No amount of taxes collected or money collected by any single municipality, even a metro, will cope with the demands at that level. Yeah. Sure.
All right, let's get more then from our listeners on Capricorn and on Power 98.7, and also those of you who are with us here this evening. Aldrin Sampear.
Okay, so anyone has a question again, please put up your hand, and then we'll read some of the tweets that have come through. But I just want to say to Dr. Ramakgopa that I don't accept the argument of urbanization, because Gauteng itself was once a rural province. It was once a rural area, you know. Development started at some point. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that the municipalities that currently exist in rural areas also benefit from development? That when the president has an investment summit, are those municipalities able to, to bid and say that this company must come and set up in our province? This company's headquarters must be in our province. You can't come into our province and just mine, but then your headquarters are set up in Gauteng. It can't work that way. These provinces must be developed as well, and these rural areas must be developed as well. So let me just quickly go to Ntatempo now. And Ntatempo now, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the former administrator of the city of Tshwane. I hope that more people would adopt his approach. He always calls in on the show. He always participates on Power 987.
I can understand.
Public representative. Stop it, Titi. Stop it. You can press it.
And I feel rather daily. I thought Deputy Minister would answer the issue about the DDM. We have created an impression that it's going to be the panacea of all of our problems. And if you hear what the president of SALGA said about the description of the rural municipalities that you referred to, would the DDM resolve those problems? The DDM is the district model. Because assumption is that you still have to have revenue. And if you don't have it and create the DDM, would we be able to resolve the problems? And Chair, so I think there's a gap in how we speak to it. Dr. Sputla, urbanization, pushing factors. They push the entire SADC. So urbanization and Gauteng bring literally everybody. How do you resolve that? Because the outcry now is that foreigners are coming here under that. the people in the hinterland of our country are coming to Gauteng. So it's going to be, and I think the point that was made, that are we ready to absorb the infrastructure can take everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and just some questions here. Question here from one of our callers, Tepo from Pretoria. Question, the Malutua Pofung local municipality in the Free State owes Eskom over 5 billion rand, but still SALGA is not making an effort to intervene and collect the money. There are over 50,000 public workers who can afford to pay for the services, but yet people still don't pay. How is SALGA dealing with this? And then just a final one, and this speaks to the role of the councillors and just how jittery it may get. And I know that Councillor Nungeba has probably come into contact with this. What's the role of SALGA in protecting councillors on the ground in situations of protest against angry community members or by angry community members? Over to you.
Okay, who would like to tackle that one first? Maybe it might be an idea to deal with the last question first there about the interventions that SALGA can make. You know, I would love to know, for example, when city of Tshwane was in meltdown there, what was the role that was being played by SALGA at that time?
Well, I may not know the exact reason why he was Tshwane. Now I may respond appropriately. But
that was before his time. I'm talking about what led to him being roped in there.
Oh, I see. What? there were quite a number of issues there involved.
Yeah.
But I think I would want to go into exactly what do we do without selecting pockets of municipalities, because we have got almost 257 municipalities with councillors everywhere else. One, we have put a system where councillors are insured, where municipalities are supposed to pay insurance value of their councillors to be able to allow when such instances and difficulties come, they are able to claim and be offered the repayment value of their houses and their properties that has been lost. I think that has been the contribution that we have made. But also, in terms of how we assist in terms of training of councillors, awareness into our communities, because the issue is more about understanding that what is it that the councillor can be able to do in a space of all the challenges that we spoke about, lack of funds, which leads in most instances to a slower pace of service delivery, because if you demand electricity and burn a councillor's house, I don't think your house will have electricity the following day. That's the essence. It's a relationship of what you have, understanding it, and how we could be able to take the country forward in terms of what are the expectations versus the delivery that the municipality can be able to offer. But ultimately, when that has not worked, there is then an insurance which kicks in and supports service, because remember, to repair is not only that you will be traumatized and families, etc. But the support care that comes after that is what we're able to try and put up. But for us, it's more about curbing that from happening in terms of awareness, interactions, but also being part of the teams together with COCTA, which deals with the rapid assessment and the rapid response into those areas from our provincial offices of SALGA to resolve the issues before they even got out of hand. The unfortunate thing is, it's a very volatile situation. When I was driving here, I was told one of my nice, quiet communities in Aranang was having a revolt. I was like, oh, okay. It's really getting tougher.
We don't have quiet communities anymore.
Well, I think that's the essence. The issue of Malutia Pafung, the Deputy President is heading a team mandated by Cabinet to assist us as municipalities on a user pay principle, which links to the first question actually also, which was raised there by Uputemba, that we need to re-educate our nation, Tabi. So there was a time where we said to our people, they must not pay to take down the non-democratic dispensation. Well, the Deputy President has been assigned a task to begin to unlock that problem, which is not only a Soweto problem, because we will be lying to ourselves if we say that 190 billion is a debt of Soweto. No. Why is it difficult? I often ask our government departments. At the end of your financial term, you return money back to government with the municipal bill being owed. Kubuhlungu ukuthi nikhokhele umasipala. You know, and I think, and that's the thinking. It's a user pay. Use effectively and pay for it so that the municipality can be able to go purchase this electricity from Eskom. And the sad part is that we pay after we have delivered. So you use this electricity. When you don't pay for it, where is the municipality going to get the funds to continue to pay for it? You go to Machabeng, for example, they are owing Eskom. Their land has now been around 134 farms, which, yes, the Eskom is saying this is the collateral if you don't pay the debt of electricity in Machabeng, which means you lose one of the greatest assets of the municipality in its book, which is land. So we need to be able to say there are some of the problems which we could solve all together rather than saying a municipality is dysfunctional. I'm not sure if we are Patala now. Giving, I'm sure he pays. He has a house.
When he pays me, I will start paying.
Just to pick up on the, and I thought pick up on the Malutia Pofung issue. In fact, we're reporting President to the Deputy President. So President of SALGA, we're reporting to the Deputy President of the Republic tomorrow, jointly with Eskom on the resolution of the Malutia Pofung situation. But Malutia Pofung is an indication of the multiplicity of problems. And one of the things we haven't discussed, comfortable possibly for us, is that it's at governance problems, serious governance challenges that require attention. It has problems with regards to service delivery. Malutia Pofung has one of the big dams in the country, but the people don't have access to water. So the reticulation of water is a problem in Malutia Pofung. In fact, the way the system was designed is such that that water is intended for supply to Gauteng. So when you go to Malutia Pofung, the people say, so you people in Gauteng, you deserve more water than us because our taps are running dry, because our system was dependent on a former Kwakwa system of Putarichawa system, but we're not getting water. So you have water problems. You have wastewater treatment works that are not maintained at all, which is contributing to the pollution of the river system. So you have a plethora of problems. So whilst we're reporting on the electricity issues asked, we're also dealing with the rest of the issues that are confronting Malutia Pofung. Last point quickly is on the district development model. The intention of the district development model is quite simple. It is to institutionalize the support that provincial and national government provides to local government. So we're establishing hubs in all the districts that would support directly the work that's done by local government. Secondly, it is institutionalizing the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act and the mechanisms of coordination, joint planning, joint implementation, joint budgeting of all three spheres of government within a district jurisdiction. So national government can't think that we're going to invest in a space without having planned with local government and without having coordinated with provincial government. And that's the intention of the model that we're currently implementing. Okay. And we intend that it should, at least we anticipate that it would yield the results.
We have 15 minutes left before we have to make space for the President of the Republic to address the nation. So I would like to use this remaining time to speak about the future now. I spoke earlier to say that it's all well and good to celebrate 20 years. That's in the past. Let's talk about where we are going, the myriad of problems and challenges that people have identified. How do we start to deal with them effectively? And to that point, that just to get the ball rolling on that one, I want to put one to you, Deputy Speaker, about, accountability and holding people to account. I mean, do mayors ever get pulled in? Malutia Pofung seems to be a case study in total collapse of governance. Has the mayor of Malutia Pofung ever been dragged before Parliament, to account, maybe at the portfolio committee on COCTA, to say, what is going on there? Why is it that you have this large dam there, but people have no water? When was the last time a mayor or a city manager gets dragged to come and talk to you about these things or to account to members of parliament?
Yeah. The late Stofile, the premier of the Eastern Cape, a villager says to him, "Where's Stofile? lo rhulumente wenu uyasebenza kodwa nifana nenhlanzi. You are just like a fish which lays 1,000 eggs, but you don't say, nobody knows about it. This, you must learn from a hen which lays 1 egg and the entire village knows about it.
Make noise.
So, yeah. So there's a problem with us and our poor communication in the first place of the repeated instances of mayors from around the country, not only in parliament, but in their own cities with MPs and committees going there to interact, to talk about things and so on. So that stuff doesn't often come up enough, in my opinion. But that will not be enough.
But making noise about it may not be enough, because I really want to see the consequences of that engagement.
Yes, the mayor who, Deputy Minister, is a very diplomatic man. But he says there are governance problems, subjective governance problems. The mayor was removed. Unceremoniously. He was removed because of those problems, some of those problems. So, in a sense, it was a combination of factors that led to that. Okay, and it remains. The president was there the other day, 2 days ago, 3 days ago. The deputy president, precisely as part of the report backs. When the NCOP goes to an area, for example, they've been there. They go, they do preparations, they go back, they then come, and a year later or 6 months later, they come back to give feedback and to hear whether there has any developments as agreed to in the previous occasions in the same areas. This is one of the areas of interacting with communities that seeks to understand what was the outcome of your presence here when we were last here. That's exactly what it is intended to do. So what I'm saying about it is that that kind of stuff does not reach many people, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to also give you an opportunity to Dr. Ramakgopa there to, because primarily you're not just here because of your experience in local government, but you also happen to occupy a portfolio now that has a key role to play in rejuvenating and reviving, resuscitating this economy. How much of that is going to cascade down to local government in terms of the work that you're doing from an infrastructure development point of view? How much of that is actually going to find an expression in municipalities in distress that are going to be assisted by some of these public works projects that you will be rolling out and so forth?
Well, I guess the best illustration... Oh, yeah.
Can I add so that he responds to that? Because...
Yeah, asking him a question also.
Yeah, no. I think there is some story that might come there. Tadetau has not spoken about it as well. The president, I don't know whether it's quarterly or how frequently, meet in what is called the Presidential Coordinating Council.
Infrastructure project.
And SALGA and major metropolitan areas participate in that. So whether he can give us insight into some of the elements that have come out of that process. It's an important all-of-government province, municipalities represented by organized local government, and the outcomes thereof. What some of the things that are emerging out of there. I just thought that there might be interesting stuff that comes out of it.
Thanks for your assistance.
Well, I guess the best illustration of the potency of infrastructure to propel growth is in answering the point that Adrian raises earlier on, just the emergence of Johannesburg. So it came about as a result of exploitation of primary resources, that is gold. Then the state took a deliberate action to ensure that they develop infrastructure to support that extraction. And out of that, you were able to grow other sectors, secondary sectors, manufacturing and construction. And over a period of time, we see the financialization of the economy of Johannesburg. What is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is the following, is that given the amount of problems that are besieging local government, it is important that the state, national government, takes a deliberate position to say, we are going to crowd in, if you like, infrastructure in a defined space. So I'm talking about roads, I'm talking energy, I'm talking water, I'm talking ICT infrastructure, your network industries. So suddenly you are able to open up the potential of that space. And municipalities then have got a pristine opportunity to put in motion innovative land-based financing mechanism to broaden the revenue base of that space. I mean, that's the situation in Port St. John's, the most pristine part of the country, but is underexploited is because the infrastructure is not in place. We're working with the Eastern Cape provincial government to provide basic infrastructure. The same can be said with Solplagi. You have been there. Part of the problem that undermines the growth of Solplagi, I'm talking Kimberley, is because of the lack of the deficit in the provision of water. So we're fixing the water treatment plants, going to address the wastewater treatment works and ensure that the potential gets to be realized. So the point I'm making is that infrastructure must drive this. Municipalities clearly don't have the revenue base, the resources to be able to fund the capital requirements. So the state must be very deliberate in playing in that spaces, including the rural areas. By the way, it's undesirable to turn rural spaces into urban centers. So when we say development of rural areas, we are not talking about the urbanization of rural spaces, because we still need spaces, places for primary production. It's about providing the minimum basic infrastructure to ameliorate the conditions of living of people and give them a better chance of progressing in life. But infrastructure will play a key role, and we are introducing innovative financing instruments outside of the fiscals, because the fiscal headspace has deteriorated, the fiscal receipts are contracting, so we need new sources of funding, and that's what we are doing, going from one province to the other, identifying key catalytic projects that can help to rejuvenate those spaces, Thabiso.
Okay. Councillor Nkadimeng, I want to probably come to you last and let you have the last word, but let me allow the Deputy Minister also to elaborate and speak a little bit more about the district development program that you touched on a little bit, in terms of something that's part of this district development program is this prioritizing of certain municipalities. I think 57 have been identified. Just elaborate on that, these that have been prioritized, how and why would these, what was the criteria in deciding on which are the municipalities to be prioritized, and how are they going to benefit from this prioritization, apart from obviously getting more resources allocated?
Well, the prioritization was always difficult because you had to balance between the strategic role that the municipality plays. So the large cities are important priorities because they become the economic centers of the country. You're also prioritizing secondary cities. And then you're dealing with issues of service delivery backlogs and municipalities in distress, and you have to balance all of those to arrive at a set of priorities that determine which ones are the municipalities where you're starting at. But that doesn't mean that the work is not being done in all the other municipalities. In fact, what we have done in terms of the district development model is we've completed a profile for all the districts in the country. We've agreed that a joint plan between province, national, and local would be developed by next year, so that everybody can then, on the basis of that plan, commit their budgets. And when you have that one plan with a joint budget, you can talk about setting development outcomes that you're going to achieve jointly as all spheres of government. And that work, to a large extent, has already been done. In the 3 pilot sites we've already established, as indicated by the President this morning, district hubs, and those hubs are intended to do 2 things. They are the mechanism through which you coordinate national and provincial government together with local government in that district space. And when we're talking about the districts, we're talking about the district municipal jurisdictions and the metropolitan municipal jurisdictions. So all of government would be sitting in a Joburg, for example, or in a Capricorn, for example, and saying, well, what is our role in small business development, in environment, in infrastructure development in this space, and how does that reinforce the plans of the municipality? So it's about jointly working together with municipalities. As I said earlier, the other mandate is to ensure that we provide direct support to the municipality. So the skills that we recruit into these district hubs is such that it is responsive to what the capacity constraints are in those municipalities. So when you go to Waterberg district in Limpopo, you've said, okay, we need engineers to support those municipalities. You need town planners to support those municipalities. Financial capacity to think about the major strategic infrastructure projects that are being talked about in those municipalities. And that's the capacity that we've built so that it's able to provide direct support to the municipalities, and that's how the model is intended to work. The last point I thought I should make, which is not the point that you raised, is this matter of urbanization. South Africa is supposed to benefit from urbanization. Like many other countries, urbanization is in fact a demographic dividend that we're supposed to reap the benefit of. Because people urbanize on the basis of the agglomeration of activity and opportunity in urban spaces. You want to be closer to educational, employment, social and other activities that are concentrated in urban spaces. And that's what drives urbanization and economic growth of cities. So one of the things we should do is to harness the urbanization of people into our cities without neglecting the rural spaces. And that's why, in fact, the next phase of implementation of the Integrated Urban Development Framework is being developed so that, in fact, we can say this is the program that we have for urban spaces, but this is the linkage that it has with the rural space that you have in the country.
Okay. Let me come to you finally, Councillor Nkadimeng, and ask you as well to talk about the role that you play, and in terms of going forward, how you are going to play that role. And do you actually, I mean, one of your stated, reason for existing is to support local government, in its transformation. In capacity, you speak of building capacity building, giving supportive, advice, talk about knowledge and information sharing. Do you have that kind of capacity in order to be able to give the necessary support that is required at local government?
Yes, the capacity we have. We are not necessarily a national organization in terms of location. In all the provinces, SALGA has got its a permanent print. It's headed by provincial chairpersons, but also full-time administrative staff under POs who are provincial executive officers, whose seats assist in all the municipalities which are within that particular province in terms of how are they going to plan, how are they going to develop the scope on what are they supposed to do, what are the challenges, and how could they jointly resolve them with COGTA and the provincial treasuries. So it could be in terms of funding, it could be in terms of the capacity that needs to be developed, it could be even in terms of sourcing of the skills that is appropriately needed and desired by those municipalities. So we don't only enter at the level of the national level. I think we also assist in terms of trying to drive the professionalization of the sector. I mean, the debate started with how does a sector becomes to be professionalized. There's a law clinic and a law society for lawyers, for example. What is our strength in terms of peer review mechanisms as municipalities? How do we accept a person who we see is appropriate to be able to be servicing people at the front line of government? Ultimately, that will be assisting us, besides only dealing with the challenges, but also having capable men and women who will be able to be responsive to the issues that we need to do. So the integrated development capacity generation, its development and attainment in terms of ensuring that what we have trained, provided, is also remaining within the sector itself. That will lead into quite a number of the problems resolving themselves. That will be understanding accountability of the sphere itself, ultimately appropriate service delivery, which is what our people are. So, and that's where I think I see the future. But to me, what has also not been said is what becomes the responsibility of our communities in owning their municipalities. This is the only sphere which is mandated by the legislation to talk to its people. And half the time, communities do not engage with municipalities, even when they are openly invited at the time of engaging with municipalities for their expectations, until things get out of control.
Councillor Nkadimeng, thank you so much. Wow, your timing is impeccable because we are right up to that time. But let me just also thank the rest of the panelists. Deputy Minister Tau, thank you so much for being part of this and participating in this. Deputy Speaker, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you as well for
co-hosting with me as well at times. And to Dr. Ramakgopa, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. And to you listening there on Capricorn and on Power 98.7, and to those of you who joined us here at the Members' Assembly, thank you so much for your participation. It is 8 o'clock, where we will now make way for the address and our family meeting here with the President of the Republic, who will be addressing the nation shortly.
Government in partnership with SALGA and Power 98.7. The power of news and information. Power 98.7 on 103.6 in the south of Johannesburg, 104.4 in the Vaal, and 107.2 in Ekurhuleni. Now we're talking.
Power to the courageous souls, the spiritual teleporters, them who raise future leaders while shaping leaders' futures all in a day's work. Leaders in their own right, the crowd shaker, the groundbreaker. We say power to you, the harmonic melodic airbender, the platform taker, the voice of reason, the perception shifter, the sister and brother from another mother. The time has come to dial into a frequency that allows you to really be you. To you we say power. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
Power Perspective with Thabiso Kotane. Monday to Thursday, 8 p.m. to midnight.